What it do, cuckolds? It's your boy, the hater, up in this mug, you know what I'm saying? And I'm here to give you guys a moment in the sun. I want to thank everybody. This has been the best month in the haters, YouTube channel in history, in terms of views, in terms of basically every metric, and more importantly, the money, as Vince McMahon would say. You know what I'm saying? Next month will be better. The month after that will be better. Every month will be better, because that's how the hater rolls. The hater moves upwards, cuckolds. Now, with that being said, let's get to something a little bit less respectful than the haters channel. Something that merits no respect and gives no respect. Wrestling. Now, that being said, obviously we're talking about the WWE here, you know. I don't even think at this juncture it's even worthwhile discussing AEW. That shit's dead in the water. Nobody gives a flying fuck. Nobody ever did, really, but people pretended to for a while. Now it's over. WWE's like, on its way out too. But realistically, if you take like the audience of TNA, combine it with the audience of NWA, and then combine it with the audience of AEW, the fact of the matter is that all three audiences combined draw less viewers than a fucking Frasier rerun, you know what I mean? Like a 25 to 30-year-old sitcom draws more people than all these shows combined. Like fucking Niles from Frasier. The guy from Big Bang Theory, the nerd, all those dorks in that show. I watched like one episode of that once randomly. I was at a hookah bar and like I watched the whole episode. I didn't laugh once. I'm like, how is this the #1 comedy in America? Anyways, neither here nor there. It doesn't matter if I like it, cucks. The fact of the matter is that show draws like 10 times more viewers than all of wrestling combined, basically, So with that being said, the question then becomes, well, what the hell is happening? How come wrestling gets no respect anymore? Well, the hater is here with answers as usual. The primary reason, in my opinion, is because wrestling is no longer over the top, right? All of us, I would say probably all of us, like I'm pretty confident in saying that there might be a few stragglers here and there, but basically all of us throughout our lives have heard this statement or a facsimile of this statement. Hey, X, why do you like wrestling? Don't you know wrestling's fake? Are you stupid? You think it's real? That kind of line of reasoning, right? Which is, of course, ridiculous. It's a dumbass argument. A lot of us heard it as kids, and maybe we didn't know how to articulate a response, but the response is very simple. Yes, I know wrestling is fake, right? Just like I know that movies are fake. You know what I mean? I am not under the impression that Liam Neeson can go kill like 50 Arabs, like 200 Albanians, and like another 30 French people in rescuing his daughter. In reality, here's what would happen. The first Albanian would put him on his knees, put one in his head, and that'd be the end of that. You know what I mean? But in fantasy land, old Liam Neeson can go and beat up everybody in the movie, right? And you watch it because you're like, all right, in the context of this movie, Liam Neeson is this unbelievable badass, right? It's unbelievable. It's absurd, right? It's ridiculous. Then you have movies where it's like Charlize Theron and she's out there kicking everybody's ass, That's unrealistic too, but nobody really talks about the Liam Neesons of the world, these unbelievable action heroes. Like I recently watched the movie Commando, or rewatched it for the 100th time, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. I hadn't seen it in a while. And it's like there's a part in the movie where he rips out a telephone booth and throws it at 3 people. You know what I mean? Like this is like unbelievable levels of violence and coolness, right? But you watch the movie because it's a movie, right? You are operating in the land of make-believe. And this goes into like everything else. Think about fairy tales, right? Arguably the original form of fiction is fairy tales and mythology, right? Everybody knows that no Arab boy back in the day found a lamp, rubbed it, and a genie came out and granted him 3 wishes. We all know that's not real, but we still tell the story because it's entertaining, right? That's the beauty of fiction. Fiction is make-believe shit for the sake of entertaining someone, right? But for some reason, wrestling is the only form of fiction, right, that gets this fisting, right? With wrestling, it's like, oh, what are you, retarded? You don't know it's fiction? Yeah, I know it's fiction. The same way that when you read The Count of Monte Cristo, excellent book, you read it, you're like, oh, this is fiction. I mean, it's grounded, like all that shit could happen, but it wouldn't happen in real life. It's almost impossible, right? The Three Musketeers, do you think that shit's gonna play out like that? But anyway, it's neither here nor there. You know, the point of the fact of the matter here is that with wrestling, like wrestling used to get some respect from the people that at least understood that it was fake, and they're like, all right, we're in here for the ride. It is what it is. We might get excited and pretend, right? Because that's what you do with fiction in general. You know, when you watch fiction, you're like, oh, I'm pretending that this is really happening. Yeah, to some level. I'm not saying you're pretending in the sense that you're like, oh, I'm in it to win it. I'm part of the story, but you're pretending, right? You're playing into the make believe. Now, with wrestling, the problem is that back in the day when wrestling was great, wrestling would lean into this, right? It would lean into the absurd nonsense of fiction, right? But nowadays, they want to present it as a sport. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. Sports is a completely different draw. Vince McMahon obviously understood this and still does, obviously understand this, and other people don't get it. It's this weird hang up, right? Like the most cringe thing you could ever hear is when people refer to wrestling as our sport. First of all, if you don't participate in a sport, it's not your sport. MMA fans do this too. They're like, our sport is growing. Like, shut up, you're a fat bastard who pirates the pay-per-views. You don't even pay for the pay-per-view. Our sport. Shut the fuck up, you know what I'm saying? This is why everyone's so detestable nowadays. But that's neither here nor there. The reality is this. Wrestling is leaning too much into its sports identity and not enough into its fiction identity, right? And part of this, obviously, and part of the reason why all of us as children and maybe as adults keep hearing things like, hey, why do you watch wrestling? Don't you know it's fake? It's because wrestling fans present themselves as being retarded, right? They don't treat it like it's fake. Right? They treat it like it's real. It's fucking weird, motherfucks. It's a make-believe show. It's a TV show. Like, if you watch WWE LFG, it's very, very clear within the context of, the show that wrestling is not what you think it is, right? They explain, they're like Shawn Michaels was like, it doesn't matter who wins or loses. That's completely irrelevant. You know what I mean? What matters is that the story is told, right? Like Shawn Michaels, if he's an intelligent human being, he's not going to think, oh my God, I don't want to lose to Booker T. He's going to do whatever is best, right, to make the show or the storyline advance. It's just like movies, right? When whatever the fuck Daniel Craig kills Javier Bardem at one of the James Bond movies, Javier Bardem doesn't think wait a second, why do I have to die? Shut the fuck up. That's the role. Play the role, motherfuckers. You're an actor. You're not an athlete, right? Wrestlers are actors. Now, they're actors that are very physically well trained and they act live, right? It's almost like acting in a play, where it's almost more impressive than being in an action movie, because if Randy Orton fucks up, the whole world sees it live. Whereas if Liam Neeson fucks up, they just say cut and they have him redo it 20 times until he does it right. That's the difference. So wrestling needs to lean into that make-believe element of wrestling as a medium. They don't do that anymore. Now it's just a bunch of collegiate athletes. Oh, like if you watch WWE LFG, I'm using that as the baseline for this, right? It's like, oh, this guy has a football background. This guy has an amateur wrestling background. I don't care at all. They all look the same to me. They all look like shit jobbers, There's nobody in that show that's ever going to make it in any capacity at the current rate where they're at, right? And like there's a few people that have some sort of a possibility, but most of them are just not going to make it on TV ever, right? Like, for example, they keep saying about that Jasper Troy guy, who actually is one of my favorites in the show. That guy's never going to be a star. You know what I mean? Like anyone that tells him you're going to be a star one day is just straight up lying to him. Like if he asks me, I'll be like, dude, it's never going to happen, bro. It's never going to happen. You're 6'3", you're overweight, you look weird, and you have some personality compared to these other dorks, but it's never going to happen. You're never going to be a massive star. Nobody in that show has the capacity to be a massive star. Maybe that black girl who's a gold medalist, she has the potential to be like a Chad Gable. That's her ceiling probably. She could be a Chad Gable. She could be like a Carmella level wrestler, right? And then you have the Asian girl. She also can be like a Carmella level wrestler, or maybe at most like a Raquel Rodriguez level wrestler, right? The rest of them are probably never going to be on Raw. They're probably never going to see the light of day on Raw. And that's the problem. It's because WWE refuses to make things interesting, right? They go there, they're like, what's interesting about you? The guy's like, I ran like a 4-second 40-yard dash. That's not interesting at all. That's boring as fuck. You think anybody gives a shit about track? Do you think anybody goes to college track meets? It's just friends and family. Nobody cares about any of this. It's boring as fuck. Now, is it athletically impressive? Yes, it is. Do I give a flying fuck? No, I don't, right? There's certain things that we have been gaslit into believing are like important things, right? So I'll give you a great example, and WWE needs to take this into account, right? The level of authenticity in a presentation is, of course, undoubtedly somewhat important. But the importance is always overstated. I'll give you an example, right? Like, who's a better actor, Jackie Chan or Jack Nicholson? Most people would agree that it's Jack Nicholson. Or, Jack Nicholson's like an old actor. Who's a better actor, Jackie Chan or Denzel Washington? Most people would agree that it's Denzel Washington. Now, that may be true. Like, in terms of, like, if you were to rate his acting, which is completely subjective, by the way, people might be like, Denzel Washington is more compelling when he plays this role or that role, and Jackie Chan is just basically a clown who makes you laugh and does cool martial arts things. That's great, but who the fuck cares? Nobody gives a shit about Denzel Washington movies, and quite frankly, they never have, right? Aside from American Gangster, and then the other one, like where he's like a corrupt cop, nobody's ever given a fuck about his movies because he plays like, he plays Denzel Washington movies. He's like a Tom Hanks, like nobody really gives a shit about Tom Hanks movies except for Forrest Gump. Like nobody, if I put a gun to your head and say name 7 Tom Hanks movies, you probably couldn't, right? Because nobody gives a fuck. But if you put a gun to my head and you say name 7 Jackie Chan movies, bitch, I'll name like 30 off the top of my head, because he's an exciting actor. Jean-Claude Van Damme, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's not just action. There's horror movies where actors stand out, right? But the point is, the acting is secondary. Nobody cares. Like, you could go watch exceptional acting by watching Schindler's List, right? Which is a good movie, to be fair, but it's also a boring movie. Nobody watches Schindler's List more than once. You know what I mean? Nobody watches like, all these biopics more than once, but I've watched Rush Hour like 30, 40 times in my life, cucks. You know how many times I watched Con Air? I don't even know. But that's the problem. Wrestling doesn't lean into that. They lean into this other side of like the performance must be good. This match was better than that match. Nobody cares. People don't care about good matches. They want to be entertained. Here's the thing. The match that ruined it all was Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker, right? Because that match, nobody really understood it. But that match was like presented as the biggest match of all time, right? Especially the second one. It was a WrestleMania main event. And the main event was like a retirement match. One of the best of all time, Shawn Michaels, is wrestling another best of all time, The Undertaker, player. And as a result, none of these guys are going to go down easy. At the end, like Undertaker is someone who's undefeated at WrestleMania, and Shawn Michaels is not going to take a pin unless he has to, unless he's dead, basically, because that means it's the end of his career. And he's not going to want to have his career end at the hands of The Undertaker in kayfabe only, right? In reality, they're like, yeah, no problem, I'm going to retire anyways. This is a good way to do it. Let's have a good match, right? When I say good match, they're thinking, let's have an entertaining match, And they did, right? But because the storyline was such that neither man could afford to lose, that's exactly what happened. Shawn Michaels was out there kicking out of things that he shouldn't be kicking out of, and Undertaker was doing the same, right? And that's great. Now, what happened next was some people in ROH saw that, right? And they're like, oh, why don't we do that too? And then you had people like Low Ki, right, who is not believable in any capacity as a wrestler. It's like Low Ki versus Samoa Joe and CM Punk, and they're kicking out of like brain busters and things like that. Are you kidding me? It's a fat guy, like a guy who's like 5'1" called Low Ki, and CM Punk who's unathletic. They should be kicking out of anything. They should go down to a DDT. Like here's how Low Ki should lose a match. Vertical suplex, 1, 2, 3. Right? They're not The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. And then everyone started doing this, right? So all of a sudden nothing matters and people are like just there trying to upstage one another and having the most competitive match. But this ain't a competition, motherfuckers. This is a TV show. And when people compete instead of cooperate in this kind of context, then shit hits the fan and the fans don't care, right? Imagine, for example, if let's say you're watching Taken, another great movie, Taken, where Liam Neeson kills about 30 Arabs, about 20 French people, and about 100 Albanians, right? which obviously in reality what would happen is in the first 2 minutes of the movie, Liam Neeson would talk out of turn, and one of the gangsters, whether it be a French guy, an Arab, or an Albanian, would have shot him in the head, and that'd be the end of that. But you suspend disbelief, right? Like we said. So imagine like now in Taken, like the last Arab, remember if you guys seen it, like the guy that like buys Liam Neeson's daughter so he could fuck her and take her virginity. Like that guy is like the last guy. He's not even like an aggressive guy. Like, you know, and you know, when Liam Neeson shows up, he's like, please, I have money, and Liam Neeson just shoots him in the head. Like, you know, fuck that shit, right? But the point is, imagine if this guy was like, I refuse to die, right? Like Liam Neeson just shoots him in the head, and the actor just like, you know, looks at the screen and says, nah, I don't want it to end this way, right? That's what wrestling has turned into, right? Like they're breaking that disbelief, that kayfabe. They're breaking the thing that makes it good, right? And instead, they're trying to leverage their personalities, which are shit, and the actual medium of wrestling, which is only interesting if the storyline is good. If the storyline isn't good, I'm not entertained by wrestling, and neither is anybody else, because it's a fake sport. The only people left that are entertained by it are people that treat it like a sport. And these people, I mean, I don't want to call them retarded because I get it to an extent, but these people, there's something wrong with them. Like either they're not intelligent enough or they're not serious enough people. You know, the idea is as follows. You know, the same way that when you watch a movie, you know, for example, if you watch, I don't know, Rocky Balboa, right? You know that Rocky, Sylvester Stallone, and Apollo Creed, the guy whose name I can't remember right now, I should know his name. He's like Carl something, right? But the guy who plays Apollo Creed and Sylvester Stallone, they're in on it, right? They're not really fighting, motherfucks. It's the same thing. Like Apollo Creed is gonna win in the end of Rocky 1. That's how it's gonna be. Imagine if Stallone just starts beating this guy's ass in real life, right? What? You know what I mean? Like, how would that make any sense? Nobody would enjoy that. They'd be like, what the fuck? The movie's just been ruined. You know, they took me out of it by acting like retards. Like the Young Bucks do that a lot, you know? They're like, oh, it's all a joke. Yeah, we know, motherfucker. Doesn't even you have to remind me every time. You know, like I always say, you don't see like Tom Cruise, you know, and some like bike chase, Mission Impossible. He doesn't turn around, look at the camera and say, I'm actually Tom Cruise. I'm an actor. What you're seeing is fake. They don't do that, right? Because that would be retarded. And that's what wrestling does. And this is especially ironic and especially egregious, and in my opinion, especially unforgivable, because this is the biggest advantage that wrestling enjoys over literally every other medium. Somehow, right? Like you couldn't believe this. If somebody told you this and you never watched wrestling, you would never believe that there's going to be a time when people watch a live show, right? That's basically a play, right? It's fake. It's entirely fake, 100% fake. And people watch it and take it seriously, you know? Because at the end of the day, when you'll say you go watch a play and you watch Romeo and Juliet, you know, you don't take it seriously, right? Like you don't get upset when Romeo and Juliet die at the end, right? You're like, oh, that's the end of the, you know, I already knew what was going to happen. That's the end of it. But in wrestling, people feel the emotions. And if somebody told you this, if someone was like, hey, you know, one day we're going to have this thing, it's fake fighting, and people are going to treat it like it's real, you'd laugh at their face. But despite this, against all odds, wrestling has made it as a prevalent, to an extent, medium, you know, of entertainment. And with all that being said, the question then becomes, where do we go from here? Well, to me, the answer is rather straightforward. People have screwed it all up. You know, they've screwed it all up by taking it too seriously. Where we go from here, in my opinion, if you want to get a lot of, you know, crowd reaction and get people that are excited again, not fake excited, real excited, you know, and maybe draw more than 1.3 million, then you need to go back to what works. And that is taking advantage of the ridiculous, over-the-top nature of wrestling, right? Jerry Springer it up a little bit, right? It's like unbelievable shit that people do want to see versus fake athleticism. Well, athleticism is real, but you know what I mean. Fake sports presented as a real sport. Well, why would anyone watch that when I can go watch real sports? Like, have you seen how boring the UFC is? Like 95% of the time? Yeah, you might get a knockout here and there, but a lot of time, you don't get, not only do you not get a knockout, you don't get shit. You get a bunch of people humping each other at the corner of the cage. You know, you're like, oh, and then Joe Rogan's like, he's going for a Hachakatame. Is he? Is he? Because this is the most boring shit I've ever seen in my life. And that's the problem, right? Wrestling can jump over that. It can skip over that. It can Liam Neeson over that. It can just be like, look, this guy did this, that guy did that. They slept with each other's wives, and here we are. Now we're going to have a match just to end the story. Right? The match is immaterial. And that's the problem. People have lost control of what's going on. And with that being said, the hater out, cucks. Hater has spoken. You know what I'm saying?